So you want a partner and to create a life with someone, but why are you attracting the wrong kind of people? And what is that about? Well, I'm Jacqueline.
And I'm Mary, and we are two therapists who believe attachment is the root of everything.
Truly everything. And we are here to help you transform your relationships and dating life. So speaking of dating life, hot topic, something that's happened to most of us, I believe, is ghosting. Have you ever been ghosted, Mary?
Yes, I have been ghosted.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Thank you.
Member of the plan.
Thank you. So my experience being ghosted is hadn't been in a relationship for a really long time. Like really, really wanting to be in a relationship. I was feeling lonely, desperate, and I started dating this person, guy, and I felt like, wow, we have this connection. We also have the same friends, and I felt really seen and I felt taken care of. I was going out to, fun dinners and we were traveling and just having a really good time together. And I just got super attached to this person.
Question. You said you were having a really good time together. Was it all I call it like tulips and cookies? Kind of like, was it all magic? Yeah, there you go.
In the beginning, it really felt like it was like very, very magical, probably for like the first like 2 or 3 weeks. And it was just like, oh my God, I feel like I was chosen by him. And I was feeling also a lot of anxiety in the relationship. So it felt really good for the first couple of weeks and I got hooked. And then then it just started not feeling that great. And I was like, I don't even know. Is this right person for me? And then I just kind of didn't care about that because I was like, oh, I'm dating somebody. I'm feeling connected to someone. And I was so hungry for connection that I kind of didn't care about anything else. Like I wasn't taking care of me so much. I was just so desperately wanting to be in a relationship.
Yeah. Which is fair, right? When, we as human beings inherently want to be in connection with others. So there's nothing wrong with feeling that. It's just more of, is it in balance with everything else?
And then my anxiety started to really take over. He started to pull back and then he just disappeared. It took me such a long time to
not even a conversation.
It was like it was over. And so it took me such a long time to get over that. Because I was just like, what's wrong with me? What did I do? So I just spent so much time ruminating over what I did wrong in the relationship. Because of course someone's going to leave me. Must have done something wrong.
Saying that, well, first of all, with ghosting, the reason that is so painful because it does leave you with all these unanswered questions. So it's a trauma of sorts, right?
Yeah.
And when we have trauma, it's the world as we know it gets flipped on its head, right? So what our brains try to do is fill in the gaps of making it make sense in the world as the way that we knew it. And if you run anxious, one of the symptoms of anxious attachment is actually blame the self. I'm the problem. So that sounds like that tracks immediately with like the anxiety as the unpredictable, not knowing will this person reach out to me?
Yeah. And just like waiting, like unanswered text messages, waiting for the phone to ring. So it was just like really just so much anxiety was just running the show because I just wanted so desperately to be validated.
Yeah. And ghosting, this is true for anybody, it kicks up anxiety. But if you have a propensity towards anxiety or tend to lead with that, ghosting can really exacerbate that. So what would you say, right? Like you gave a more extreme example, right? You're basically in a relationship with somebody who pieced out without telling you.
Right.
Which is just, for all you out there who have ghosted, please do not do this. And we're going to get to that. Okay. Do not do that. There are ways to handle this. And one of the things Mary and I as therapists are so passionate about is really helping you guys communicate better. So some of this stuff isn't even a problem.
Exactly.
Now, on the side of the ghosty, what would be your advice of kind of the top 3 tips you could provide in order to heal and move through that experience?
Well, it would have been helpful to have a therapist at that time, but I didn't have that. I did, have like friends who probably listened to me ad nauseum talk about, should I do this? Should I do that? So I just like, I think having a support friend group is going to kind of hold you through that time. And it also feels kind of crappy that it's like that. I feel all I'm doing is complaining about this
Mhm.
person. And so also like just being able to, sit in those feelings and kind of like make sense of what those feelings are actually about.
Yes, I'm so glad you said that because what I hear in, first of all, when you mention therapists, you and I have spoken about how we process things differently when we're already on the path of having some levels of awareness around our stuff. Some stuff is going to be processed. We're going to handle situations differently, as well as that part of that. What helps around therapy is that way, like the therapeutic, the healing connection, where you're not hiding, you're able to fully express. Hopefully, I know the joke out there though. I never share that with my therapist, but I actually, while I am a therapist, I have a therapist myself, and I am really honest. Like that is one of the places I go to that, to have that sanctuary for myself. But those of us who run anxious, that external, right? Like they tend to value external more than internal. And so having that supported friend network, the therapist, all of those tools outside oneself are going to be extra helpful in navigating that, along with what you mentioned, learning to tolerate the feelings. And that's that. I always look at it as like right bicep, external, social, really strong in anxious attachers. Left bicep, the internal, I'm okay with my own experience. I can tolerate these uncomfortable emotions. That bicep's a little weaker, right? So building up the balance will help the healing. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have any tips?
Right. Well, what I would like to share actually is, and I think these will apply to what ghosting looks like on a smaller scale, right? Because we have like, right, it's on a spectrum, just like attachment style. There's a spectrum of how anxious are we, or who brings out what in us, or how avoidant are we. So, um, I was on a date with someone, and we had had a nice time. There was some chemistry there. I ultimately I could just feel intuitively that I didn't have legs for long term. But it was a good date and it was fun. And at the end of the day, we hugged goodbye, and there was a moment of like, are we gonna kiss or not? And for me, I didn't want to kiss on the first date. Like I just didn't want to do that.
Good for
And he
you.
said, it did feel good actually. That's something. I also run a little anxious. That's something for you. Anxious attachers is gonna be your best friend, right? Because anxious attachers have itchy say no. Avoidance can say no all day long, right? So for avoidance, maybe the answer is gonna be the yes. But for anxious people like me, it's allowing the no. So we didn't kiss. And then he said, we'll talk soon. And then the soon never came. Okay. And the thing is, well, it's not a complete ghosting, right? It was just like no follow up. And I know some people don't consider that ghosting, but I think in today's language, it is. And what it stirred up in me
Well, there's an
was,
I think when there's a setup of a level of
yeah,
expectation, it's not met, then that can definitely fall into the category of ghosting.
exactly. And that's what it did. It just hit this little part of me that was like, but maybe, and is he going to follow up like when I get home? Is there going to be a message, or, it just kind of triggered that part that was like, will he, won't he? And and this is what I would share with, because I had done enough work around healing my attachment style, I was able to really ground into my feelings about it and focus on that. And my feelings were, I don't get that. Like, it wasn't quite the kind of connection I had wanted. So even giving myself that as an anxious attacher, right? Because that like need to feel close can kind of trump your
Yeah.
truer feelings. And that I didn't really see it going anywhere. So I kept it on me. And that's some advice that I would give, of really making sure, if you were in the experience of dating and you run a little anxious, is to really make sure you're able to ground into, how do I feel about this person? And I remember before, I had so many years of therapy, and I wasn't in grad school yet before this stuff. And I remember a friend said to me, I was talking about some person, and she goes, but where are your feelings in this? How do you feel about the person? And I was like, but what are you talking about? They're doing A, B, and C. And
Right.
I'm trying to see if they like me or not. And I couldn't understand that, like, I was allowed, I couldn't even see it. So there was huge progress around that. And the bottom line is focusing on yourself. And because I'd done enough work, that regulation piece, by the next day in the day, I didn't even care. I was like, I don't even want to hear from this person. There's no going out again. And that was like a proof of growth. So, and I still had to do some regulation. I still had to assert that this was like a thing that it put within me. And I would say, you and I have been speaking about this, for communication, I could have in the moment, actually, because I felt that moment when he said, we'll talk soon, I could have actually said something then for myself.
Right.
I could have said, are you sure? Like, were we feeling this for a second? And just cleared that up for myself in the moment. Or maybe I even said, you know what? I had a lovely time. I kind of don't see this going anywhere, even though you were great. Just to say that could have saved me even that.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's so important because I think also in the moment, what I was hearing you say was like, you were allowing yourself to notice the feeling, even the feeling of when he said talk soon, it's like, will we? Will we? I
Yes.
don't know. And so, and also just even, like noticing like what part is yours, what part is his. I think that's really important. And one thing that I wanted to talk about too was, we were talking about tips was like, when I hear the words, we'll talk soon, that to me is a red flag. That means we are not going to talk at all.
Which I knew. It immediately was like, but
Yeah.
then it's still confusing.
Right. Right. Because is the ding a red flag or is the ding being like, ooh, he likes me. He likes me. So I think that
It was confusing.
it's
a little mixed
definitely
message.
confusing. And so I think that's why it's important to, for me, when I was ghosted, there were so many red flags that were going on, but I just chose to ignore them because I wanted that connection so badly. So just like what your friend was saying, what do you want? And so I didn't even give myself any time to figure out what I wanted because I think I really wanted was a connection. Didn't know with whom. So I think like paying attention to those red flags because those red flags have so much information. If we don't pay attention to red flags, then we are not coming into that relationship from a place of our intuition, which is our all knowing. That's like really where the compass is. We're just like, everything is just getting completely jumbled up. We're ignoring our intuition and we're ignoring the red flags.
And, that reminds me how I asked you while you were seeing him, was it still all, what did you say, rainbows and unicorns?
Rainbows and unicorns.
Colored tulips and cookies? We'll include all of
Right.
that, all of those
Girls
yummy
got
things.
cookies.
I did eat a whole box the other day. I don't want to talk about
There's
it.
some mountains.
I think they're actually called chocolate coconut
Yeah.
now. Or
Yeah.
so that's really fast. So there's coconut.
I know. My God. Okay.
Back to what you had said, that you were noticing little things along the way. And I truly believe this. When I think back upon every experience that has happened to me around ghosting, I can think of another one off the top of my head.
Yeah, girl.
Yeah, that's kind of and working with clients and seeing the same similar things. There are always those little intuitive hits. But when the insecure attached part of us that says that, and we'll go with the anxious right now, because that's what gets triggered when someone's getting ready to ghost us, when we sense the unavailability, the anxiety can come up within us. It knows, but because the survival mechanism says, no, I need you close to feel okay, it starts to run the show. And so part of the work is, as you learn to regulate, feel your feelings, you build that muscle for the ability to tolerate discomfort. And that discomfort is going to lead you to learning whether somebody really works for you or not. And that can be terrifying for both anxious types and avoidant types and the disorganized type, right? In essence, it's an insecure with my experience internally.
Yeah. I mean, that discomfort plus so much information.
So much. Yeah. And learning of, is this a red flag or is this something within me or is it a little bit of both? Sometimes we might need more time, but it can take away the sting of the surprise, which I think is really important.
Yeah.
And speaking of, just to touch upon, I think this is really important for all of you people out there who've done the ghosting. I'm proud to say I never have, because I always went with, I want to treat someone how I would like to be treated, which is to know. And so for ghosters, let's hear your top 10.
Oh, God. I can totally talk about ghosters because I've also been on the other side of ghosted.
Mary, you should be ashamed.
It doesn't. Well, for me, it didn't feel good to be somebody who ghosted, but and also like I couldn't tolerate.
Not feel good at the moment or later? Like, were you clocking in
It
the
still
moment?
doesn't feel.
Oh,
Well, I mean, yes, I was clocking the moment. I was noticing. I'm like, this feels so uncomfortable for me to so instead of telling the person the truth, like, I'm not interested in a relationship with you anymore, it was just that felt like so insurmountable to do. It was just easier to disappear. And I think that's the discomfort. And so I think it's really important. This is what you were getting to was how do you show up as a person who usually avoids the goodbye and just as, what we call Irish goodbye. Irish goodbye, all the goodbyes where you just kind of disappear
The
into
Irish
the
goodbye.
goodbye, goodbye with no goodbye. How do you, so what do you do as the ghoster? What would you tell somebody to tell some, what would you have told that person who's, oh, we'll talk, what would you have wanted to hear from them instead?
So I'm a big fan of be direct, rip the Band-Aid off. The truth hurts for a second, but it brings you the peace. So while the rejection might hurt, the peace around it can feel great. You move on quick, right? So it hurts, but quick and done, right? And so I would have preferred if he had just said, listen, I find you lovely, but we're not quite a match. And nice to meet you. And that would have been a little sting. Now, I've done enough work to have the ability to handle my rejection because that can also make us spiral if we're uncomfortable with our emotions, right? So it is that dance. And right, some of us, I know I've heard some people say, I don't want to hear what's wrong with me, but that already says there's nothing wrong with any of us. We could just not be in alignment on some level.
Exactly.
But going back to, the avoidant part of us, it's important to remember this doesn't mean their behavior is okay, but that the behavior is also coming from a place of insecurity in the sense of I'm uncomfortable with my feelings. I'm uncomfortable with the conflict. I'm uncomfortable with this conversation. Or I'm going to rationalize right out of it, just check out of it, forget, right? Some of us, the freeze response can make us completely forget, right? The anxious type's like, when are you going to call? When are you going to call? When are you going to call? The avoidant type's like, I forgot. Oh, I just feel like contacted you in a week. That's good because they can actually forget. So there are different ways. It's like apples to oranges. Yes, they're both fruits, but they're different fruits, right? So there are different ways of processing or not processing really. And so for the avoidant, it's going to be to start getting oneself to fire that they're actually like having the awareness of, oh, this is uncomfortable for me or something's off for me in some way and safe for me to express myself. It doesn't mean that person's going to respond in a way that is safe. You get to leave and walk away, but that in essence, it feels safe within you to have the ability to be honest. And that takes time and there ain't no way out but through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's uncomfortable. Feels uncomfortable because, most of us didn't grow up in a house that had a lot of like open and honest communications so that we can work through the discomfort of that. So when we're adults and we're trying to figure out, how to be in a relationship, we don't want to hurt the other person. And so we'd rather either not say anything and just disappear or on the flip side, have the anxiety show up and just be like, am I okay? Is it okay? Or, and just be, wanting to be like validated. So I think learning these ways of communication can actually be so relieving because looking back, if I had just said to that person like, hey, this isn't working out, it would have saved me
So much time.
so much time in trouble. It wouldn't have felt good in the moment. And looking back, I know I could have walked away, felt really good about myself for being honest with myself and being honest to the other person.
That I just want to give a few tips around language we can use because sometimes I'll get asked that, like, what exactly would you say? So if you're in this position where something isn't feeling right, I had a really great time with you. As a woman, I say this, I don't know if as a man or somebody who identifies as non-binary would say this, but I intuitively feel we're not quite a match or something feels a little off about this. I don't think we're quite in alignment, but I had a great time with you. And, good luck in your search, right? Like that's a very easy thing to say that doesn't bring out, oh, you had this thought. We don't want to get into there's something wrong with you, because there's not necessarily. There's not necessarily something wrong with me. It's how we're interacting together. So just as simple as there's something that doesn't feel like quite in alignment. So it's going to be a no for me. Or, you know, I, I think that way, that we're not quite a match. It's a gentle way. That's the thing. What would you say, Mary?
I think that's a really good idea. And I think the other part of it for me is what just popped into my head was like, it's kind of incredible that we go out on these dates and with that expectation of, oh, is this going to be my forever person? And so I think maybe changing the expectation, going into the date as, okay, this is going to be a fun experience. I'm going to meet somebody new. I'm going to learn something new about somebody that I've never met before, instead of, oh, I'm buying my wedding dress on my way to the date. This will work out. And so I think like really managing expectations can be really helpful for those of us who are anxious.
And by that, I just want to clarify with those managing expectations, because those of you who are on anxious avoidance will have no problem with that. They'll be like, great. I can do that. But the anxious types might say, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know how to manage my expectations. I can't help but show up in this way. And what I say to that is knowing, oh, I'll just use myself as an example. Oh, Jacqueline, if I were in those shoes, oh, you're really wanting to meet your person because you're struggling with maybe being alone right now, or maybe you just really want to be on to another phase of your life.
Yeah, or be in partnership with someone.
Yes. Yeah. And so you see how I recognized within myself and kind of did that self-talk of understanding what I was feeling. And even, I don't know if you could hear it, but there was an element of compassion towards myself. And that's how you manage those expectations. So I know this is hard, Jacqueline. This is something you want to hear that. Let's just go and have a good time, right? Like that is a start. It's a stepping stone to letting go of those expectations.
That self-compassionate self-talk.
Love it. What is it doing for? So remember, each date here is an opportunity to work on this stuff, to work on the communication, right? To work on your attachment style and regulating yourself so that you can come to the table ultimately as a secure individual, right? Because stuff is going to happen in life. We can't control that. We do have the power to turn ourselves into having that deep, secure attachment, and that will serve our whole lives better. So take us with you when you're on your next date.
Yes, take us with you when you're on your next date. Notice any red flags. Talk to yourself with self-compassion. I love that, having that conversation with yourself. And what do we want to leave our listeners with? What's the last juicy tip?
I think reminding yourself that somebody else is also going through an experience. And while that might be scary because it might feel like do I have no boundaries if I have empathy or compassion? It can also make you understand that it is not so personal. Ultimately, really good self-care, it is essential. It is not the icing on the cake. And if you guys have questions, email us, reach out to us. We want to hear from you.
And until then, happy dating.
Bye.